3 years had passed since I left the predictable rhythm of American life behind and moved to Thailand. The decision hadn't been impulsive, it had been necessary. I needed space to breathe, to remember who I was outside of expectations, outside of my age. Here, in Chiang Mai, I built a life of movement and stillness. Tutoring bright-eyed students from international schools in the mornings, teaching yoga at sunset by the river, and occasionally helping people find clarity in moments of psychological chaos. I wasn't just surviving, I was finally living. Most days, I forgot I was 45. Some days, I felt 29. And on rare days, I believed I could even be younger, if energy and desire were age-defying forces. Then Julian arrived. It began with a video call from my sister, Sarah. Her voice was tight, barely holding together the worry she wore like perfume. She told me Julian had left university, that he was reeling after the end of a years-long relationship, that he was lost. She didn't ask me to do anything directly, but I could see the unspoken plea in her eyes. Can you help him? Like you always help others. That night, I looked at his Instagram profile. Still the same boyish grin in his photos, still the same freckles across the bridge of his nose. I wrote him a message. Nothing heavy, just a gentle nudge, an open door. He didn't answer. So I did what I do when someone's silent in their pain. I acted. I wired him enough money for a flight and a little more. And I sent a single message, a photograph of the plane ticket. One word, come. A few days later, a notification lit up my phone. A reply from Julian. Thank you, but I don't understand why you'd do this for me. I stared at that message for a long while. The subtext was clear. Why me? Why now? But I didn't respond with explanations. There was no need for one. Some things don't require rationality, only instinct. When he arrived at Chiang Mai International Airport, I recognized him instantly, but not as the boy I remembered. Julian had become someone else entirely. Taller, broader. His jaw had squared, his shoulders had filled out. A dark-haired storm with quiet eyes. Handsome in that way that made people stop mid-sentence. And yet there was a softness, a fragility in his posture, like something inside him had shattered and was still finding its shape. He was wearing all black, despite the Thai heat, and carried only one bag. As we embraced, he smelled of foreign airports and unresolved grief. You've grown, I murmured, stepping back to look at him. I was expecting a boy with a skateboard, not a man who could model for cologne. He chuckled awkwardly, eyes darting to the side. Yeah, well, life happens. I see that, I said. And clearly you have a deep soul, Mr. Mysterious. I'll have to investigate further. He smiled at that, bashfully, and I realized how long it had been since someone had made him laugh without a trace of judgment. Back at my villa, he settled into the guest room as if it had been waiting for him all along. The place was simple but open, floor-to-ceiling windows, slow ceiling fans, and always the distant hum of cicadas in the trees. I cooked. He ate without appetite, but he ate. I spoke. He listened or tried to. He was a beautiful ghost of a man. And slowly, day by day, the fog around him began to lift. We talked every evening on the terrace. About heartbreak. About identity. About silence. Sometimes we said nothing at all. Just sat under the soft lantern light and drank lemongrass tea while the night bloomed around us. One afternoon, after a long conversation about his ex, about what it feels like to give someone everything and watch them walk away, he returned from a walk with his skin flushed red from the sun. His back and shoulders were tender, burned in angry streaks. Julian, I scolded gently, leading him into the bathroom. You're supposed to be smarter than this. He sat on the edge of the tub, shirt off, a towel around his waist. Guess I needed the pain, he muttered. I think you've had enough of that, I replied, and began to anoint his back with aloe balm. My hands moved slowly, carefully, trying not to linger. But the moment felt suspended in something neither of us could name. His skin was warm beneath my fingers, and when he exhaled, soft and vulnerable, I nearly did too. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. But the space between us began to hum with something unspoken. Something dangerous. We didn't talk about it that night. Instead, we pretended we were nothing more than what we had always been, an aunt and her grieving nephew. We ate, we laughed, we played cards like old friends. But every time our eyes met, I knew we were both aware of what had passed between us. The next morning, I suggested a hike. You need the mountains, I told him. You need sweat and silence and the sound of waterfalls. He nodded, as if relieved that I hadn't mentioned the night before. As we climbed higher, The air thinned and the sunlight became golden and slanted. And then through the trees it appeared, a hidden waterfall, pouring down like silver over dark rock, surrounded by nothing but the green hush of nature. There was no one around. I stripped first, peeling my clothes off like a second skin, not caring about modesty or convention. I was 45. I had earned this body, this freedom. I waded into the cold water with a gasp and looked back at him with a grin. "Well, are you coming in, or are you just going to admire me from there?" He laughed, his voice catching in his throat. "You're insane." "Of course I am," I said. "That's why I live here." He undressed slowly, shyly. And then he stepped into the pool, water rising to his chest. We splashed, shouted, played like children. And then came the moment. He looked at me, not as a nephew, not even as a friend, but as a man looks at a woman he suddenly desperately needs. From my neck to my hips, his gaze moved like a touch. And when our eyes met again, there was nothing left to hide behind. A wave rolled between us. Not of water, but of something else. Something we would never come back from. That evening, after the waterfall, we barely spoke. The car ride back to the villa was wrapped in silence. Not awkward, not cold. Just thick. As though words would rupture whatever fragile line we'd crossed. Julian sat beside me, arms crossed, gazing out the window. And I drove like a woman possessed, gripping the wheel with fingers that still remembered the weight of his gaze on my skin. He hadn't touched me. Not physically. But the air between us had burned hotter than touch ever could. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. That I had only imagined it. That the look in his eyes could have meant anything. That this was still salvageable. But deep down I knew better. When we reached the villa, Julian thanked me quietly and went straight to his room. I watched his figure disappear down the hallway, broad-shouldered, towel still draped around his neck, hair damp from the waterfall. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, moonlight sliding over my sheets, wondering what I had just awakened inside both of us. The woman in me, the one who had suffered, who had healed, who had sworn never to lose herself for love again, felt both terrified and alive. And then came morning. The kind of morning Thailand often gifted me, wrapped in citrus air and birdsong. The sun gently climbing up the trees like it had all the time in the world. Julian joined me on the veranda, hair messy, coffee in hand. He looked at me carefully. "I've never seen anything like that waterfall." "Neither have I replied, not taking my eyes off the jungle. Not the water. Not what happened in it. There it was. The line. Spoken aloud. He said nothing at first. Then, did something happen? I turned to him slowly, met his gaze. "You tell me." He hesitated. And then, bless him, he spoke honestly. "It felt like I wasn't supposed to feel what I felt." "And did you?" He nodded once, barely. "So did I." The silence between us pulsed. "I don't want to mess anything up," he said suddenly. "You're the only person who's made me feel safe in a long time." I reached for his hand. Not to pull him closer. Just to hold him steady. "Julian, I'm not here to break you. But I won't lie to either of us about what this is." "What is this?" he asked. "Something neither of us planned," I whispered. Later that day, we decided not to talk about it anymore. We tried to return to something resembling normal. He helped me carry groceries, sat beside me during yoga classes, even started running with me in the mornings. His mood lifted. His appetite returned. He cracked jokes, dry and awkward, the kind I loved. At night, we watched movies together. Sometimes we sat close. Sometimes far. But always, there was a magnetic field between us that neither of us acknowledged but both of us obeyed. One evening, he came home sunburned again. This time from lounging too long by the beach while I taught a private yoga session nearby. "You're turning into a papaya," I teased, pressing a cool compress to his shoulders as he winced. He laughed. "Could be worse. Could be a mango." "You'd make a handsome mango," I said, and immediately regretted how low my voice had dropped. We froze. My fingers still on his skin. But this time we didn't pull away. Not immediately. The days passed. He began helping a local agent I knew, doing small jobs, photographing villas, uploading listings, learning the rhythm of a life he hadn't planned for. And I watched, almost in disbelief, as the boy I had flown halfway across the world began building something of his own. But the tension between us, God, it didn't leave. If anything, it grew thicker with each day. He became stronger, more confident, more himself. One evening, I was floating in the pool after a long class, the sky streaked with lavender and fire. I was reading messages on Instagram, letting the water lull my tired limbs, when I felt someone slide into the pool behind me. I knew it was him before he said a word. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his voice soft at my ear. I've never wanted anyone as much as I want you. My breath caught. I thought this was just a moment. But it's not. I turned in the water to face him, the glow from the pool casting light across his cheekbones, his lips, his eyes. You're not a toy, I said. You're not something I'm going to discard. He swallowed hard. But I'm your. Don't say it, I said sharply. Not right now. The silence filled with splashes, with breath, with the kind of honesty that leaves bruises. He held me tighter. I don't care what it looks like to other people. I know how I feel. And how do you feel? I whispered. Like I belong to you. And maybe I always have. The next morning, something in me shifted. He wasn't just a man who had lost a girl. He was a man who had found something, someone unexpected. And perhaps so had I. He started selling villas a few weeks later. The agent he'd been assisting handed him 2 properties, both neglected, both overlooked by wealthier investors. Julian, ambitious in that quiet, steady way, put every spare dollar into renovating them. And within months, they were rented out to tourists who couldn't believe such places existed. I saw the pride in his eyes the day he handed me the keys to one of them. This one's ours, he said. I didn't ask what he meant by ours. I just took the key. Love never knocks politely. It arrives the way the monsoon does, hot, electric, and with no regard for the walls you've built. I tried to pretend Julian and I were still navigating something uncertain, undefined. But every night when I lay beside him, sometimes close, sometimes apart, I knew exactly what we were. We were in love. And not the foolish, impulsive kind either. There was something rooted in the way he touched my back in the mornings, how he brought me fruit without asking, how he listened when I rambled about philosophy or chakras or the smell of monsoon rain on jasmine. He wasn't dazzled by me, he was with me. Present. Alert. Choosing me again and again. He had stopped being my nephew the moment he looked at me like a woman, not a concept. And somewhere between the silent waterfall and his first villa sale, I had stopped being afraid. Or so I thought. The phone call came on a Sunday. I was sitting on the porch wrapped in a thin linen robe, the sun just beginning to burn the clouds off the hills. Julian was inside making breakfast, singing badly to an old Prince song. His voice was warm, off-key, and endearing. When I answered, I didn't expect to see Sarah's name. I hadn't spoken to her in months. I answered with a smile. Sarah? She didn't return it. Are you in a relationship with my son? Silence. No greeting. No pleasantries. Just that one sharp, unbearable sentence. It knocked the breath out of me. I don't know what you mean. I lied poorly. I think you do. Her voice cracked slightly, the mask of anger thinning to show the pain beneath. Julian's cut me off. He barely answers texts. And now he's renting villas in Thailand like some middle-aged real estate mogul. He's not just visiting, Liz. He stayed for you. I swallowed. Sarah, listen. But she was already crying. I trusted you, she whispered. He's my son, Liz. And you're supposed to be family. I never meant for this to happen, I said, voice trembling. But I love him. I love him. And he's not a child anymore. Sarah hung up. I sat there, the morning sun burning too brightly, the birds suddenly too loud. I felt my age for the first time in years. Not because of guilt, but because I knew what would come next. The confrontation. Julian found me like that, still on the porch, the phone limp in my lap. What happened? He asked immediately, crouching beside me. His brows furrowed, voice quiet. You look like you saw a ghost. I shook my head slowly. It was your mother. He stiffened. What did she say? She asked if we're together. And what did you say? I met his eyes. I told her I love you. He was quiet for a long time. The silence stretched between us like fabric, tense, transparent. Then he nodded. I'm going to call her. Julian. I have to. She needs to hear it from me. He walked inside. I didn't follow. I stayed outside and listened, even though I didn't want to. His voice was low, angry, edged with something raw. You don't get to make me feel ashamed for loving someone who saved me, I heard him say. I was broken when I left. She gave me space to be whole again. There was more, but I stopped listening. I didn't need to hear the end. I already knew it. Sarah wouldn't forgive me. Not now. Maybe not ever. Later that night, I sat in the pool again, the water cool against my skin, moonlight turning everything into silver. Julian joined me without a word. We didn't speak for a while. just floated, weightless in the silence we had earned. "I'm sorry I ruined your relationship with her," I said eventually. He shook his head. "She was already slipping away. You didn't ruin anything. You gave me something worth staying for." His arms found me underwater. His forehead rested against mine. "You gave me the kind of love I didn't know I needed." I kissed him, not out of lust or desperation, but as a woman who had nothing left to hide. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. We began to move differently after that. No longer afraid of being seen, no longer hiding the small intimacies, his hand resting on my waist while we cooked, my head against his chest during quiet evenings. He kept growing. So did I. He bought 2 more villas, renovated them himself with hired workers, clever designs, and bold choices. Tourists loved them. The bookings filled up faster than expected. He would come home at night, tired but beaming, his skin bronzed, his eyes alight with purpose. "You should have been a businessman," I teased once. He kissed the top of my head. "I was too broken to be anything before I met you." And then, as if life itself wanted to honor that rebirth, I received an unexpected call a year later. Sarah. She was quieter this time, more open. "I still don't understand," she said. "But he's happy. I can hear it in his voice. I don't know what to do with that." I didn't answer with logic. I spoke with my heart. "Love," I said, "doesn't always come wrapped in what we expect. It's not always clean or explainable. But if it's real, you fight for it." She didn't respond, but she didn't hang up either. And sometimes, silence is the first step toward forgiveness. A year passed, long enough for seasons to turn and souls to soften. Long enough for the world to feel less like something we owed and more like something we were allowed to shape. Julian had become a man before my eyes. Not just in body, that had happened long ago, but in presence, in stillness, in certainty. He spoke less, listened more, made decisions that impressed older men, and yet never stopped looking at me like I was both a compass and a mystery. We had fallen into something that neither of us dared define at the start. But now it was simply us. No one else lived in our villa anymore. There was no hiding, no pretending. He kissed me when he walked in from showing villas. I brewed him tea in the evenings. We made dinners side by side. And every night, without fail, he read a few pages of whatever book I left on his pillow. Out loud, because I told him once I liked the sound of his voice. I kept teaching yoga. He kept building his small empire. We were a rhythm, a pulse of ordinary and extraordinary moments. And yet, there were still days I felt the weight of the world's gaze, even if no one was looking. Because the truth never stopped being complicated. He was still my sister's son. But more than that, he was my choice. My equal. My heart. One evening, I returned from teaching to find him sitting under the frangipani tree, a small velvet box in his hand. He didn't get down on one knee. He just looked at me like he always did, with that quiet fire. "Before you say anything," he said, "I know what this looks like. I know what it sounds like. But I don't care. Because I'm not proposing a wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm proposing this." He gestured to the life around us. "A promise that I will wake up every day and choose you. That I'll build something that keeps making you feel young, alive, and respected. I'm not asking to be your husband. I'm asking to be your home." He opened the box. Inside was not a diamond, but a ring made of carved teak wood, inlaid with a simple jade stone. I reached for it slowly. My hands trembled a little. "Did you make this?" He nodded. "With the carpenter in Changdao. Took forever." I laughed, tears catching in my throat. "I can't give you everything," he said. "But I can give you truth. And a life that doesn't apologize." I slipped the ring on. It fit perfectly. Later that night, as we floated in the pool, stars overhead like scattered pearls, I said, "I never thought my life would look like this." Julian swam closer, brushing my wet hair from my face. "What does it look like?" "Like something forbidden that the universe allowed anyway." He smiled. "Maybe the universe has a soft spot for people who break rules with honesty." Months passed. Sarah softened. She sent a postcard from New York. Just 2 words, "He's glowing." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the door cracked open. Julian never asked me to justify what we were. Neither did I. Some nights we danced barefoot in the kitchen. Some mornings we woke up tangled, the sun slipping through the bamboo shades, our hands still clasped like we were afraid to let go, even in sleep. The locals began calling us Kon Rak Play Tang, those who love at the edge of the path. Fitting. We didn't belong in the center of society. We weren't interested in fitting into its lines. We thrived on the outskirts, where wildflowers grow without apology and rivers twist as they please. One day, sitting with him on the balcony, watching the world unfold in gold and green, I realized something. I hadn't simply saved Julian. He had saved me too. Not from loneliness or boredom, but from aging without fire, from surviving without beauty, from living without love. As he leaned his head on my shoulder, I whispered, sometimes I still think of that message I sent you. Just that one word, come. He smiled without opening his eyes. Best word I've ever read. And then, as the sun slipped behind the mountain and the cicadas began their symphony, I whispered the other word I never thought I'd say again. Stay. And he did.